Okay, so Richard, please wow us with big data. Thank you very much.
All right, it is all about big data. Thanks very much, Nick, for that very kind introduction. So, yeah, if you don't know about Flurry, that is a very kind, but I probably would hope that you do all understand what Flurry does, but we'll have a quick look at some of the stuff today. So, we are a very, very big data company, and we aggregate that data to really power the mobile application ecosystem. And we do that in a number of ways. Obviously, we do it through analytics, which is principally where we have most of our awareness. And I can go through some of those really big numbers in a minute. It also powers our advertising network, which is called App Circle, and that powers monetization for publishers, acquisition and re-engagement, and video for advertisers and promoters. So today, I just want to go through a couple of things. Won't take long. One is some of the really useful insights and trends that we see, and if anyone follows our blog on a regular basis, you will have seen some of these before. Just to give you an insight on things like rolling retention, what happened at Christmas, in-app purchase for male and female, young and old. So we just want to have a quick look at those. Second part, just want to have a look at how our customers use analytics to make better games. And so there's sort of 4 or 5 case studies that should give you insight as to what that data really, how that data really comes alive, and how it helps you understand what's going on in your game. So here's some pretty big numbers. We now track, I think it's 155,000 applications for about 60,000 companies. I had a debate at the Mobile Games Forum a couple of weeks ago, if anyone followed it on pocketgamer.biz, because it was stated that there actually is no industry standard analytics out there. And we obviously were refuting that at Flurry, because what makes something industry standard is it when most people use one particular product. And we think we've got to that stage where we are the industry standard analytics company, and we're powering more applications across all of the different operating systems: iOS, Android, Windows Phone, Java, and RIM. We track about 30 billion app sessions a month. It's about 1.3 billion a day. An app session is literally a start and a stop within an application. We track about 400 million smartphone devices, so anyone keeping up with me on the numbers. Our App Circle network, which is where we monetize for publishers and we promote and provide opportunities for advertisers. We have app developers around 5,000 and a reach of just under 200 million now. So I've kind of mentioned those 3 services, so I will flip those. A couple of most recent ones for promotion is Clips. We can run 15 or 30-second TV-style commercials inside applications with our own player, and we can run around 6 million completed video views a day. And that's grown from a standing start last summer. So let's have a look at some important industry trends. Some of these you may have seen before, maybe not. So we know how many applications there are in the world, I guess, and they're just going to throw that out there. And as the general manager for Europe, my background is in many areas, but also in search. And I'm seeing a repetition of history. When I was at Overture, which became Yahoo Search Marketing, which was way before the times that Google even was on the radar, I would have very regular conversations with marketers asking me, how do I get to #1 on the keyword loan, the keyword travel, the keyword insurance? And we'd have this long sort of conversation about whether it was appropriate to be #1. Are you going to drive loyal and engaged customers? And it's fascinating that we're getting the same conversations time and time again. And I probably have that conversation every day with promoters saying, how do I get to the top 20 position? How do I get to the top 10 position? And if you think about the number of applications out there, let's say DG is somewhere between 650 and 700,000, it is kind of madness that we're all chasing those top 20 rankings. And therefore, we want data to really help developers and really help you guys understand how to find better quality users, how to find those that are going to be loyal and engaged for you, and how you monetize those, and how you keep them within your game. And that's part of what we really want to help drive with analytics. So what happened at Christmas? We did predict it at about 1 billion downloads over the Christmas week. We call that the Power Week, which is Christmas Day to New Year's Eve. On average, we see around 750,000 downloads a week, and that rose by 60% to 1.2 billion downloads over that 7-day period. which really shows that there was so much at stake at Christmas, and there will be on a continued basis. We saw around 5 million downloads in the month of December, which you compare that to January of last year, it was just over a billion downloads. So there's a 5 times increase in 12 months in the number of downloads that users are downloading over a monthly period. We also saw the number of activations rise dramatically on Christmas Day. Anyone guess how many activations of smartphones and tablets there were on Christmas Day? I don't have a prize.
I have a prize.
Okay. Anyone guess, if you read the Flurry blog, you'll know, anyone guess how many smartphones and tablets were activated on Christmas Day around the world?
5 million. 500 million.
500 million, please. 5 million is not so far away. Any other guesses?
2 million.
So 6.8 million. So does 5 million get a...
There we go.
Okay, so I think 5 million gets close. At least he put his hand up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Of which 20% were tablets. And on average, we saw about 1.5 million activations a day for the previous 20 days. So 1.5 million on average activations for every day running up to Christmas Day, and then 6.8 on activation on Christmas Day itself. And then we saw the pattern of when people started downloading. And for those of you who have young children, and maybe those children were given iPads and Galaxy Tabs and smartphones for Christmas, actually the downloads started really climbing at about 5:30 in the morning on Christmas Day. For those who do have children, you wish it was more like 7:30, but and that peaked at about midday, and then ran right through to about 10 o'clock at night. Massive amounts of downloads during that period. This is where we're looking at the target addressable market. So this is where we think the penetration of smartphones are across the world. And by the way, we know this because we track nearly every smartphone in the world. What I mean by that is nearly every smartphone in the world has at least one app with Flurry software in it. So even though we don't ship with applications with Flurry tracking in it, very, very quickly, almost within a day, one of those 155,000 will be downloaded to that device. So we have a very, very accurate picture of what the penetration is around the world. Can we take questions at the end? Yes. Thank you. Just hold that thought for a moment. So if we look at US, China, UK, and Japan, so you can see, and India, which I'm going to throw out the next slide. The next slide is the target addressable market. So where's the upside? If we think times are good today and we think the opportunity is big today, I guess we'd kind of say we haven't seen anything yet with regard to the potential growth. Just pick out a couple of those. So you can see India's at a penetration of 3 million. And India's got a potential upside of a further 75. You see China is at 35 million. We see a potential upside. So that's a target addressable market of those adults, what did we say, 15 to 64-year-old middle-class adults. There's a further 122 million in the upside for China. And if you look at those 1.2 billion downloads we saw over Christmas week, 65% of them were in the US, China, and the UK. So if you're thinking about developing for certain markets today and thinking about where the potential upside is for tomorrow, then we would strongly argue that you should really consider 2 or 3 major markets. Obviously US, China definitely, India, and Japan, followed by UK. So there's a fairly major upside awaiting. As marketers would say, we're only just starting out. We're only just getting going on some of this opportunity. So you can see the distribution of number of downloads. Customers do try a lot of content. I'll go on to rolling retention. Celia, for those of you who saw Celia's presentation yesterday from WeWorld, we're talking about how long do users stay engaged, and we've got some data on that. But you can see that games are scattered right the way throughout that very long tail, games being the dominant one. And then in terms of session length, so the number of minutes spent in different types of categories, nearly half is in this wonderful world of games, and another third, just a third, are social networking. So 80% of all time spent is in those 2 categories. So I said we'd look at money spent. So this is in mobile freemium games, difference between age and gender and willingness to pay and actual pay. So this is a spread of 100% pie. What proportion of that spend is distributed across age and within the age and gender? So you can see that the 18 to 34-year-old age bracket, a common target audience for marketers and brands. So anyone that's been selling advertising to brands will often give you a brief, which is, I want to reach 18 to 34-year-olds. If you're thinking about monetization, you really think in those terms. If we want to look forward to a future where advertising doesn't come necessarily from the likes of Zynga and their VC-powered marketing spend, but it actually comes from Procter & Gamble and Unilever, and making our games market very brand safe and being able to target through age and gender, which Flurry is building capabilities for and we're launching in Q1. But if you look at the 18 to 34-year-old bracket, you can see that 37% of the 18 to 34-year-old males accounts for 37% of all money spent, and they account for about a third of the time spent. If you look at women, they count for about 30% of the time spent and about 27% of money spent. So the 18 to 34-year-old male and female is the most important target audience. Maybe it's screaming the obvious, but I think it's useful that we can see that data before us. We also produced a report on average in-app purchase transactions. Did anyone see our report in Q4 on the average, when you look at all those that spend a lot and all those that spend a little, what the average in-app purchase transaction was? Have we got any more prizes? Maybe. Okay. Average in-app purchase transaction. Magnus, I suspect you know because you read our Furry blog, but put your hand up. So what is it? $14. Perfect. $14 average in-app purchase transaction. And that is distributed. So 13% of transactions account for 51% of revenue. And that 51% of revenue is average transactions of over $20. So 13% of transactions, nearly just over half of all transactions, and 71% of transactions account for 31% of the revenue. But the average is 14, which I think when we produced that data back in Q4, I think the market were really quite shocked. Well, surely it's 99 cents. Surely it's 79 cents. That's the average, isn't it? But if you account for the whales and the minnows and what balances out, it's actually $14, which is an amazing number. We had a look at, this is a Q3 analysis from last year, the categories and the differences in the European markets. I guess there's just a couple of interesting points of note there. The French love their free games, and the Italians love their social networking. The French also love their free games, and forgive those, there are French in here, but they also love their free games, but they frankly don't pay for a darn thing. Whereas the Italians obviously love their social networking, very social, and they're obviously in Facebook most of the time. But interesting, you see the different dynamics across the European marketplaces. Okay, I said I would talk about rolling retention. This is a pretty worrying slide for everyone, and we understand that, but it varies by market, it varies by app and by game. But on average, this is rolling retention. So if you assume that everyone's active on day 0, on average, rolling, what happens after 30 days, what happens after 60 days? So on average, apps lose 62% of their audience within 30 days. And on average, apps lose 96% of their audience after a year. It's a phenomenal number. And it really shows the challenge that you're having one-night stands with most of your customers, most of your users, most of the time. They try you once and they leave. So in those very, very early days and those very, very early experiences, making the game super simple, super effective, and very enjoyable and very engaging, and keeping them for longer is obviously key, especially in the freemium world where user engagement equals page impressions equals ad impressions, and opportunities to make money from in-app purchase. So second half of the presentation is just looking at Flurry's analytics and the sort of data that you can pull out from our tools that help you understand what's going on. Often in small developer communities, opinion can count, and he who shouts loudest is saying, this is what's happened within our game. And what we want to do at Flurry is take that opinion off the table and show you exactly, statistically, what's going on inside your application. And here's a few ways to do it. So user statistics. For those that use Flurry, you'll know most of these. So you can obviously track new users, active users, frequency, session length, and rolling retention, and user retention. By the way, we do count new users and downloads very differently. iTunes will count a download to the store. We count a download to the device. So if you have a mother iTunes account for your family, but multiple iOS devices, we count each one of those devices as a new user. And by the way, it's not the download we count, it's the first launch. So once that application is downloaded and launched, that is when we count them as a new user. Secondly, usage benchmarks. For those that are familiar with Flurry, we track 155,000 applications across most categories. So you can do benchmarking against 2 or 3 key metrics: frequency, session, and rolling retention. You can benchmark and see how you perform against all the other applications Flurry is tracking within the category. Thirdly, audience analysis. So you also may have seen that we've been developing Flurry estimates on age and gender. We have absolute data, believe it or not, on about 18 million devices. And you're probably thinking, how on earth does Flurry have that data? Well, the vast majority of applications don't ask for age and gender through the registration process, and probably quite rightly so. You probably don't really need to do that, and that would alienate and disengage the user. But there are certain sectors and there are certain applications that do always ask for registration information. Social networking typically, and the very big vertical is dating. Nearly every app asks for registration. Whether the age and gender is often accurate is what we will always question, as we always downgrade our age by about 10 or 15 years when we're putting us details on a dating site. So we often will take that analysis, and what we'll do is we'll iterate and we'll look at the app profiles of each of those devices against that age group until we're 99.99% accurate that we have a very good estimate on that device. And so when you go into Flurry and you look at Flurry estimates, you'll be able to see that we will make an estimate on the age and gender. And we've done so many testing, actually, it's coming out very, very accurate. And where we don't know or we're not confident that we can estimate that device, it will show as not known. So you'll see you're known and you're not known on Flurry estimates. So incredibly useful data for you to see what your profile of age and gender against some of the statistics I threw up earlier, and how you compare, and whether you're appealing actually to the audience that you thought you built the game for. And what does our estimate show? And I mentioned that actually we're going to use that data for brand advertising purposes. We have a very firm eye. I've mentioned video and TV advertising. I've now talked about age and gender, where we can really start to attract big brand advertising into our network based on that capability. Audience segmentation, you can segment quite a number of ways. And in the early online days, again, to use that analogy, you'd probably pay handsomely for this type of analysis, but it comes free as part of Flurry Analytics. And this allows you to segment a number of ways. One, you can segment the class of when you acquired them. So let's say, for example, January last year, June of last year, and you can see how those users behave against the time that you acquired them. You can also do it by age, by gender, by location, by language, by country, and you can really cut and slice your audience. You can also do it by custom events. So if anyone's doing any event tracking, and I can talk about events in a minute, an event is a completed action. You can then say, okay, I want to know what my segment of in-app purchases look like, i.e. all those that paid something, and what do they look like? Event tracking, I've mentioned, that's tracking anything within your application that's a completed action, anything that you would see. So that's levels, completing levels, and making in-app purchases, liking on Facebook, anything you like. You can track up to 300 events within Flurry. And portfolio management. So for those that have got and deploying a very successful portfolio management, then we can track that. We can track the cross-sell. So how many of one app are also using another? We also can track the upsell. So if you produce a light version and you want to upgrade to the paid version, we can track the instances of that happening. Again, Celia used yesterday an average upsell percentage of somewhere between 0.5% and 5%. And we can track that very, very accurately for you. So here's some case studies. This is a user path analysis. So once you've created events, you then create a user path. And you can go down a number of levels. And in this particular scenario, you can see that 25% start the game and then quit. So 1 in 4 of this particular project's users, they were losing almost immediately. you can also see that only 7%, 6.9% viewed help. And this developer prided themselves on being very intuitive, very easy, but actually they saw that maybe the game was much harder than they thought. And this is where they can see what's going on. And so it triggered two things: redesign the game and make the help much more prevalent so that you actually can make people enjoy the game much quicker and go to help should they need to do so. I mentioned segments, and this is how you can look at segments. This is a resource management game with a zombie theme. I always got to be careful whether I actually reveal the project. But you can see here on the drop-down, they actually created 4 segments: female, male, paid users in US. And because it was a zombie theme, they found that the female users were much more loyal than the male, and they could reflect on the design and see it was actually quite cutesy, very, very, very appealing to females. They also saw that their US users were much more loyal. They're an American company, and actually when you looked at the design of the game, it read very American. But the US users were much more loyal, much more engaged than any other users around the world. And finally, they then were tracking those that made in-app purchase. And unsurprisingly, in that particular sector, they were much more engaged, much more frequent, much higher session length. So you can see there how you can then start to segment and then start to have a look at how those users behave differently from all your users and benchmark those accordingly. This is more fairly simple market analysis. This is a restaurant booking app. And it's just basically tracking which restaurants the users are booking on the application. And it kind of complements more than anything else their online measurement tools and their online web tracking, but also to see the differences. And also to see the differences in proximity of time between when they book the restaurant and actually when they're actually sitting down to eat. So it more complements your online marketing and online tracking. This was a pretty amazing one. It's actually not a game example, but it's one of the largest newspapers in the world. And they decided to put all of their content behind a paywall. But the clever sods that we are found a loophole. And this is how they found what users were doing. So you can see that the store purchase confirmation, what do most people do afterwards? So 65% cancel that transaction. But the loophole was, even though you cancel the transaction, you can continue accessing that newspaper's paid content, but for free. It's costing that newspaper millions and millions of dollars a month. As I said, we are all clever sods. It went wild on the blog community. If you kind of know the story, you might know which newspaper I'm referring to. And it was costing them millions of dollars a month. So this user path analysis enabled them to close that loophole and stop people canceling the store purchase transaction immediately, yet gaining access to the content on a continued basis. So a subject slightly closer to Flurry's heart on advertising, although I have to stress this wasn't one of Flurry's videos. They were showing commercial videos within the game. And on this user path, you can see that after the video was shown, 24% ended session. That's a very high price to pay for just showing someone a commercial ad. If you imagine that in the TV world, that would be unthinkable. Each time there's an ad break, 25% switch off the television or change channel. Would be unthinkable. So in this instance, the cost of running the commercial was just too high, and so they took out the videos whilst they then went back to basics and had a look at what else to do and how else to monetize. So it just again shows you, whilst you might be getting some upside in the commercials, there is a significant downside on the loyalty. Tracking in-app purchase sales and customer lifetime value, pretty sort of commonplace for us, but for those of you that may be not tracking, not only the volume of transactions, but the price paid. So you can see that 47%, 170,000 within the last 30 days made an in-app purchase of a certain amount, so 99 cents. Another 20%, so 75,000 purchased at $1.99. So that's kind of 5 or 6 case studies. I hope that was really useful. Last but not least, I just want to show one case study. Nick will know this. I did have 5 or 6 sales slides in here talking about Flurry's App Circle capabilities on acquisition and re-engagement and video, but they said I couldn't have them in there, which is fair enough. So my last slide is just purely a case study. This is Creative Mobile, a small but incredibly talented team in Tallinn in Estonia. I think they are the only developers in Tallinn that they can find and we can find. And they engaged with us last summer for their Android application, Drag Racing. Drag Racing has been a phenomenon if anyone's been following it. They have achieved just under 50 million downloads. And last week, according to Flurry's analysis, 3.8 million active users last week on just one project, Drag Racing Android. And they've remained in the top charts ever since last year. I think this morning they were in the top 35 in the US chart, and they were in the top 20 in UK and Germany. And we cut them checks for millions of dollars. We're really proud for that partnership, and we're driving 20,000 installs a day at an average net value to that developer of 45 cents. Our average charge for a download is 75 cents. So that was the shameless plug. Do forgive me. Any questions?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I know we're very tight on time. So, Chris, if you want to get up on deck, and then we can get as many questions as possible if you want to get prepared. Well, first of all, thank you.
Right.
I mean, it's refreshing to see somebody come here and actually talk about absolute figures. There is nobody who has a better pulse on what's going on, so I encourage you to ask very direct questions and get him to reveal some very direct answers. So I'll hand the microphone over, and please speak the question so we've got it for the video.
And if you could tell me where you work, that would be great.
Hello, I work for a company called Tetris. We do translation and localization. So the question's around that. Do you guys separate your analytics and know kind of the importance of what happens when an app is localized in a particular country and how it affects the sales of that particular app?
Not in standard analytics. The only place that I think you could discover localized differences would be through segmentation. So once you've built the app and you've put in Flurry Analytics, you could build segments. There are some tutorials on how to build segments. It's pretty straightforward. And then you could create your UK, your German, your French, your Japanese, your US users, and then you can see how they behave. See all the localized differences in user behavior. That's how you would do it, I think. This guy had a question, so I'm going to allow him to. I suspect it's going to be a tricky one. I don't know.
Hi there. We're a small app publisher, and Flurry for us is like a big thing. We can spend lots of time with, and you just know what to do.
Great.
The question is, would there be a possibility for us to pay one of you guys for, like, I don't know, 1 day or 2 days or something, that you set up your system?
Yeah, I'm available.
Ours?
I'm available for weekends for sure. My day rate's all right. No, seriously, we do know that that's a known issue with 60,000 companies around the world using Flurry, and we have, I think, 58 employees. We are under-resourced and helping, although it's a free tool, and by the way, Flurry Analytics is free and will always be free. We do know that people actually wouldn't mind paying us, and I probably have, but I would actually be happy to pay for that resource and that support very regularly. So we are hiring a general manager of analytics. I think we're down to final shortlist. And he or she is then going to hire a team that support customers from an analytics usage perspective. We're also trying to make the analytics as easy as possible to use. So customizable dashboards is coming up. So rather than getting a one-size-fits-all, you can customize the dashboard. Say, actually, I want to see my segments, I want to see active users, and I want to see frequency. And they're the three things that I really care about. So the customizable dashboard will be able to do that. So we're trying to make the user interface as flexible as possible. But in London, actually, there's 3 of us. So we are under-resourced currently in Europe. But we are looking to support our analytics customers better. But it is a known issue. But yeah, I'm available at weekends for sure. Yeah, drink would be good.
Yeah, my question was regarding to, you said that you don't track smartphone users, but you have an app on basically every smartphone.
We track almost every smartphone device in the world because at least almost every device has at least one app in it that we're tracking.
Yeah, so yeah, and that's where I have a two-part question.
Right.
The first question is, of those 500 million whatever apps, how many actually use Flurry Analytics? So that you can confidently say, yes, one Flurry Analytics app is on every smartphone. And I recently read an article, I don't know if the source is repute because of, it was a random blog thing or something, that actually said that a very large part of the smartphone users do not install a single app or just one single app. So I think it was 20% or something like that. If users would just install a single app, how high would the chance be that that's yours?
It would be low, but it depends on the application. So to answer your first question, we actually track 155,000 applications. So 155,000 applications does have Flurry software in it. And that's on account, let's say, about 20%. But it's about 80% of traffic. It's about 80% of sessions. I don't know the answer to the second question. I just refute it. The number of smartphones that have only got one app in it just doesn't make any sense, and it's not a number I would recognize. I think we see on average users have about 65 apps per device on average, including the ones that come pre-installed and preloaded, and the ones that they then go on to download. And I think on average, users download about 20 in the first week. But as you can tell from the way I'm answering, I'm just slightly on shaky ground. All our data is in 823 servers across 3 server farms, and we do track 4.5 times Twitter, but it's not in my head. But if you give me your card, I could definitely come back to you on that.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we've run out of time today, but Rich will be around, I'm sure, all for the rest of the day. You know how to recognize him. He'll be outside and can answer any questions one-on-one. Please stay around, because we're going to go straight into sort of Chris.